Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they really do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this night-ending bonus upload, shall we? Today's first encounter, Baxter, Arkansas. I was standing about 10 feet down in the forest around a deep ravine, not really too far from the house, but it was right next to a patch of woods going back further south into the national forest. The narrow patch of woods then stretched on northward. Leaves were on the ground. That was the first thing that impinged on my consciousness, the sound of something walking through the leaves. It was a measured, long tread, I could tell. I started really looking and trying to see what was making those sounds. I was much braver back then. Then, over on the other side of the ravine, close to the bottom, but definitely walking uphill, I saw it for all about 3 seconds. It seemed like longer at the time, and about 50 to 100 yards away. It was very large, and I could see that it was hairy. I could see the ground between its moving legs and some vague image of arms, but not a head. Some forest branch obscured my view of the very top part of the body. I could tell it was walking upright uphill, and it was not a bear. It was striding with purpose up the hill on the other side. It was quickly out of sight, though. Now I know I wasn't thinking clearly because I decided I had better try to get a better look at it. So I ran quickly as I could around the rim of the ravine. Since its origins begin in the front of our yard, not the best playground, I can tell you. Anyway, I didn't take long to reach the other side and move down into the woods slightly to look around and see if I could find anything. I didn't see anything. I was there for only a minute or so when it suddenly occurred to me that I didn't hear anything anymore at all. No sound, no birds, nothing. And fear, like I had never known before, hit me. And I went running, practically screaming, back to the house for my mother. I told her what I had seen, and she, of course, didn't believe me, although she told me to never tell anyone else this story. For a long time after that, I didn't tell anyone except family members, but they didn't believe me either. It didn't help that only 1 or 2 people since then truly believed that I saw something in the woods that day. Since then, I have a lot of trouble going out alone in the woods. While no one actually calls you a liar, they look skeptical, and you can tell they either think you've been drinking, taking drugs, or you saw a bear. Today's second encounter. A good friend of mine and I saw a dogman in Chateauguay in Quebec, Canada. It was the summer of 2008, if my mind is correct. During a late evening hike with my friend in a park around 9 or 10, we began to be followed by this animal who was acting very strange, emitting dog-like sounds. When we returned to the entrance of the park, this thing cleverly followed us at the edge of the woods, just avoiding the light at the entrance of the park so we couldn't see it. Like it knew we couldn't see anything at night, and the light would reveal it. When we were running back to the parking area, my friend and I entered the car in a hurry. When he started the car, my friend saw the face of this beast 2 or 3 meters from his window, standing on 2 feet and staring at us with a creepy grin. My friend is a very tough guy, normally, and he knows the forest very well. He has seen lots of predator in the past. It was the first time I ever saw him terrified like that. A couple of days ago, his father saw a muscular, massive black dog in Larry, a small town near Chateauguay, around their cabin in the woods, close to a marsh. The creature had large shoulders, and it confronted the father of my friend by staring at him from a distance of 5 or 6 meters. The moment the father of my friend tried to reach a kind of spear weapon to confront it, the creature ran away into the marsh very fast to never come back. His father never told us about his story until we talked about ours. So maybe it was the same beast living in the area, or another one living in the same area. We will truly never know. Today's third encounter, Benton, Arkansas. In early mid-October of 1981, I was about 17 years old. I was working weekends in Fayetteville, a town 28 miles from where I lived in Salem Springs. I usually left for work around 5:30 in the morning. I would drive the old Highway 68 towards Fayetteville, Springdale. One morning I was on my way to work, and as I was coming close to where Fairmount Road was, I could see something by the bridge at first. I thought it was a coyote, or a large dog scratching around the bridge with its back legs, but as I got closer, I realized it was not, that it was a Sasquatch. It was reddish-brown in color, and I could see its face area had almost no hair, and the skin tone was lighter than the rest of it. It looked up at me as I passed over on the bridge. My car was a Volkswagen Bug, and the lights were not very bright. It seemed to be startled. I looked in the rearview mirror to see it jump up and run across the road. It moved in long strides and very quickly. It was tall, maybe close to 7 feet, and was thinner than I would have expected. The activity it seemed to be doing when I first saw it was digging at the ground next to the bridge. The motion it was using was very similar to what primates do. The manner in which it moved across the road was, however, more like a human would move. Today's fourth encounter. One of my uncles has a farm, and one of his many pastures is located in Quebec. This is about 3 kilometers north of the border of New York State. My dad and I were chopping wood for the following winter. We were at the edge of the pasture where the wooded area started. It must have been a little after lunch when my uncle stops by to speak to my dad. He said that one of his calves was missing, and he couldn't find it. So we stopped what we were doing to help him find the missing animal. I was happy to get a break because my father had a habit of pushing me hard, and I hated not being allowed to play with my friends during the weekend. Anyway, I dart off in the woods, heading south through the thicket. I was running, ducking down, and jumping through the branches, just having a good time. I must have run 2 or 3 minutes at most. Then I was running, and I heard a low, gurgling growl. I put on the brakes immediately. It's hard to put into words. This thing moved sideways from behind a thick bush. I could make out half of its face. It looked like it was on all fours. It was very large. I was standing up, and it was as high as I, maybe 1.2 meters off the ground. It looked like a black wolf with very pointed ears on the top of its head. I only made out its shoulders and left arm. I didn't see if it had hands because the grass and bush was very high. Its forearms were not proportionate right. It was just way too long. I just froze and felt like my heart was going to pop out of my mouth. I saw a grin from half of its face that I could see. I must have stood there for about 5 seconds, but that's the longest 5 seconds of my life. I turned around and, without thinking, ran as fast as I could. I got back to the pasture looking for my dad and uncle. When they finally got back, I tried telling them what happened, but they just told me I saw a big coyote. I've never seen a coyote or any dog smile like that before or since. A week later, my dad tells me that one of my uncle's employees found the dead calf, cut into pieces not far from where I saw that huge canine. I still have nightmares to this day. Today's fifth encounter, Franklin, Arkansas. The witness lived near the top of Younger Knob on property adjacent to a very large, deep, and steep-sided mountain hollow, formed by the South Fork of the White Oak Creek. On the day of the sighting, she and her 2 young daughters climbed down the side of the hollow to check on her 9 or 10-year-old son and his 12 or 13-year-old cousin, who had camped along the creek. The trek to the base of the slope took hours of careful travel with frequent rest stops along the way. When they reached the narrow canyon floor along the creek, they could hear the 2 boys calling to them from their campsite further up the creek. The 2 girls were allowed to start walking toward the camp, but the witness sat down on a large rock beside the creek to rest for a little bit. While sitting there, she noticed something shining in the water and was preoccupied with trying to determine what kind of object she was seeing. By that time, the 2 girls had reached the campsite. She could no longer hear the 4 children talking. While looking intently at the shining object in the creek for several minutes, the witness had a strong and sudden feeling that she was being watched. She slowly turned to look down the creek and up the creek, and then carefully scanned the bluff and terraces across from her position. She saw nothing in those directions, but still had the growing feeling of being watched. She then turned around on the rock to look up the steep slope she had just traveled. She froze when she saw a large, human-like being staring down at her from a sharp ridge about 100 yards away. The witness stared at this creature for several seconds and mentally recorded details of its appearance. While her eyes were fixed on this creature, she heard all 4 children laughing and shouting as they ran toward her. She immediately stood up and started walking to intercept the children. She quickly moved back toward the ridge, and the creature was gone. She hurriedly gathered the kids and started walking cautiously back up the wall of the hollow. As they approached the area where the creature had been standing, they could smell a strong, rancid odor, like that was produced by a large male bear. Hours later, they climbed up the canyon and returned home safely. Today's 6th encounter. We were at my grandfather's trailer, and my dad and he were out on patrol, as my grandfather was the city marshal. My older brother was sitting on the couch watching TV and eating a sandwich, while my little brother and I ate SpaghettiOs. My older brother kept shielding his eye with his hand, like he was out in the sun, but it was nighttime and we were indoors. When I asked why, he became upset and said something was looking at him through the window in the front door. My mother looked and saw it too, and put a blanket over the window so it couldn't see in. Later, she said it would look like a dirty old hippie with glowing eyes. The blanket must have angered or scared it. It pushed on the trailer and rocked it for a little. Then, after, walked around the trailer a few times, breathing very loud. It tore apart a shed out back that was empty and left. Later, everyone tried to write it off as a black bear. But when we cut our stay short and left the next morning, the bottom stair on the front deck was broken, and about 3 feet out was a perfect bare human footprint. I remember as being somewhat large, but not gigantic. Probably only as large as a big man with a size 13 or larger. I think it smashed through the step and landed hard on one foot. It was the only track. This is when I committed the greatest crime against cryptozoology. I picked up a stick and obliterated it. Sorry guys, I was 5, and it was how I fought back. It would have been a perfect cast. I wish I understood then how important a cast would have been. Today's 7th encounter, Saline, Arkansas. A hunter stated that he first heard deafening roar, screaming, and growling sounds from unknown animals on the forest mountain slope north of his concealed hunting location. He assumed the animals were just bear. He heard tree limbs and brush cracking and breaking as the animals came closer to the opposite side of the clear cut he was watching for deer. He saw the brush being shaken and bent, and within a few seconds, he saw 2 huge auburn-colored animals come rolling out into the open woods alongside the clear cut. He estimated that they were about 150 yards from his position. He states they were wrestling and grappling and rolling as if in mortal combat. As he watched, they separated more than once, and one of them would try to run away in a quadruped fashion, only to be run down and caught by the other as it traveled upright on 2. The witness said that each time the fleeing individual was caught, the 2 began wrestling and rolling on the ground again, all the while screaming and roaring. The fighting continued down the mountain, just inside the woodline adjacent to the clear cut, and in clear view of this hunter. The hunter stated they were soon within 50 yards of him, as they reached the old logging road just above the point where he had earlier walked off and concealed himself in a gap on the rock outcrop. At the point the animals reached the log road, the road crossed a rocky branch. The moment the 2 reached the log road and branch, all of their previous sounds and actions ceased. Immediately, one of the subjects turned to look up the log road and branch, and the other looked in the opposite direction. One of them slowly scanned the woods in his vicinity and looked directly at him. Within a split second, they both stepped into the brush and vines in a boulder-strewn branch bed and disappeared without another sound, and without visible movement of vegetation through which they passed. Today's 8th encounter. Early 2007, a witness was driving down Baseline Road and passed a park. She saw a large dog sitting in the park and paid no attention, but then she saw that it was starting to run after her car. She said it stayed right with her on the driver's side and didn't seem to want to give up. She floored the gas and was going pretty fast, but the dog kept up. Finally, she lost it. She looked in the rearview mirror, and the dog stood up on its hind legs and walked across the road. She vowed never to be in that area again at night. She said a short time later after that, a friend was driving to her house down Baseline Road and saw the same creature. It chased her as well and walked on 2 legs. Today's 9th encounter. Let me first say this incident is not made up. There is absolutely no doubt what my father and I saw. Neither myself nor my father would have any reservations about a polygraph test. It was my 11th birthday, therefore my father let me miss school and go to Lake Conwell, which is known for its crappie fishing. We were in a boat with a small outboard motor in the cove tied to a stump, which was in the water. For 10 or 15 minutes there were noises in the woods like limbs breaking continually. I kept telling my dad there was something in the woods. It was very thick brush and cypress trees. But he continued to say, "Son, it's just the birds." I was fixated 20 feet away on those noises, so I was just looking in that direction constantly. My father was turned around looking away from the shoreline. All of a sudden, it just came out of the woods and stood there. I can honestly say that I could not talk. This has never happened before or since. I finally got my dad's attention and said, "Get the hell out of here. Let's get the hell out of here." My father whipped around and said, "Oh my gosh." He then pulls out his .38 and drew on the animal. It never did anything except stand there. It was absolutely non-aggressive except for earlier breaking the limbs. My father then untied the boat, started it, and we kept circling around for at least 10 minutes. Will not break my father's anonymity in the community, but let's say he's a very well-known person in a town of 20,000. Therefore, we never went public with the story. But we still think about it pretty much all the time. There is no doubt in one of two things. Bigfoot, or someone in the great costume in central Arkansas on that weekday, waiting in the cove way back in the lake to scare someone. I like to think to myself as somewhat of an intellectual, and my father has his doctorate. My point is that if it was a joke, then the person risked death because my dad had a gun pointed at it from 20 feet away. Today's 10th encounter. 4 teenagers walked into the Shalmar Golf Course under the cover of darkness in summer of 2012. The course is a highly populated residential area of the city, so the group tried to keep quiet, walking along the line of palm trees next to the wall. Then their world changed. We were just talking. My girlfriend says something like, "Hey, something just jumped off that palm tree." A few seconds later, she yells out this blood-curdling scream, just pure shock. I turned and saw something that I'd only seen in movies. There's a creature lumbering along the wall towards us. It was as tall as me, 6 foot, hunched over, huge snout like a werewolf. The beast lunged towards us, and we took off. It was chasing after us. I just turned and ran. I didn't think to look back. Today's 11th encounter. I was visiting some friends in Huntington, Arkansas in the summer of '88. We all decided to go to the local lake for some bass fishing. They had warned me that there were tons of water moccasin, to be very careful where I stepped. I was moving along the bank fishing, and I was paying a whole bunch of attention to where I was placing my feet, when all of a sudden there was a commotion in the woods, about 15 feet to the right of me. When I turned to look, I could see a very large creature, about 7 to 8 feet tall with very broad shoulders, and could hear some sort of whooping noise. Thinking this was one of my companions trying to scare me, I moved toward it. At that time, it grabbed the tree trunk next to it and just twisted it off and kind of snapped the ground with it. It made a very low guttural growl. At that point, I was more scared than I'd ever been in my life. It was really intimidating because of its muscles. They were flexed and its head was tilted down, and it was staring right at me. My dad had taught me about encounters with bears and what to do. My instinct was to run, but my dad always taught me that an animal will chase you if you run. I just dropped my pole and looked down at the ground and slowly backed away. This creature followed me for a short way and just turned and walked into the woods. When I got back to where my friends were, I told them what happened, and they just laughed and made fun of me. I have never been back in that part of the country since. I now live in a desert where there are only a few trees. Well, there you have it, folks. Tonight's night-ending bonus. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps this channel growing and going. and honestly what gives people a chance and a place to share their experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and they are dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the answers, and God bless.